know about you, but sometimes I find that talking about Christianity can be an overwhelming minefield to step into. And I don't think I'm the only one. It's just so tangled up with all our ideas, opinions, and emotions, you know? Plus, you don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to offend anyone. You don't want to sound stupid or be accused of not being faithful enough for not knowing something. And I think that's why so many people say they never talk about religion in mixed company. Luckily, Tammy and Laura don't have a problem talking about any of it. They understand that theology is an ongoing conversation between people of faith who are just trying to get closer to the truth about who and what God is. And it's in the conversation that things become untangled. Welcome to Untangling Faith. We're pretty excited that you're here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
Good to be back for another episode.
Yeah.
Hello.
We have some new faces, guys, and we've got some people that we want to introduce. But I'm super excited about our topic today. We are talking about something that is called deconstruction or deconstructing faith or something like that. I'm going to get into a little bit of defining of what that is for you guys who are listening or watching. But first, I want to ask our guests to introduce themselves. We've got two folks here who are near and dear to my heart, and are going to kind of share with you guys and with us some their story and their experience with this particular topic. Rhanda, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yes. Okay. So my name is Rhanda. I'm really bad at introductions, actually.
All right. Do you want to share how we know each other?
So Laura is the pastor of the church that I go to. I have been going there for 2 years. 2 years? Yeah,
2 years.
I think.
The pandemic, since after the pandemic.
Yeah, I think I started, in 2023.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So yeah, I've been going to her church for about 2 years. It's been a fun journey. I am 28 years old, and I am a mom of 2 boys.
2 gorgeous boys, 2 little boys.
Yeah, little boys.
Yeah.
And Renee, would you like to introduce yourself? I'm so excited you're here too.
Yeah, I'm Renee. I also attend church with Laura and have for, this will be year 11, I think.
Okay.
And I am married and I have 2 not little girls. I have
Right.
2 girls that are about to leave me and make me an empty nester, and it makes me sad.
Empty nests aren't that bad. They're not that bad.
She's only going to JSU. She's going
I
to be
know she's going like just down the road, but still, just the thought of not having her like for home for dinner every night, it's going to be an adjustment. But we're excited. We're excited for the next chapter.
Yeah. I'm excited for her too.
Oh yeah, me too.
So I had 2 boys. So I know what it's like to have boys around. My boys are 28 and 30 now, but I'm also an empty nester, and it is different because I really grieved the fact that they lived in my house meant that I got some sort of update every day about how their day was going, and when they're not in the house, it changes a little bit. Every stage with the kids becomes a good one, so it's not all bad.
I'm hoping that is because my mom gets a daily update from me every day still. So I'm hoping it's a girl thing and they still like call mommy every day. We'll see. But I can see every day there's a little bit more independence there, and Layton's working and going to school. I know it's hardest for me. I had him when I was so young, so it's always been me and them, so it's hard to let go.
And so I know y'all because I have done things with Laura's church, even though I'm the pastor at a church a couple blocks away from y'all. And so I'm really appreciative of y'all coming and talking about this topic with us.
So what we're talking about today, folks, is deconstruction. I've always been of the knowledge, what I've known about deconstruction is what I have basically gleaned off of Facebook and the internet and people talking about it. I've been in Facebook groups called Deconstructing Faith and stuff like that, and kind of picked up on what other people were talking about. And that's how I got it, sort of by association. My knowledge included this. Deconstructing is taking the religion that you started with, pulling it apart, and kind of rebuilding it from the ground up, was how I interpreted it. But today I learned that it's actually born out of the evangelical church and the evangelical experience, which is you guys, which explains why I thought of you two when we were going to do this. And so I read a little bit. I'm not going to go into the fact that it's based off of a 1960s philosopher and whatever. But there was one guy, Kevin Van Hooser, who wrote about the philosopher Derrida. He said, the motive behind Derrida's strategy of undoing or deconstruction stems from his alarm over illegitimate appeals to authority and exercises of power. The belief that one has reached the single correct meaning, or God, or truth, provides a wonderful excuse for damning those with whom one disagrees as either fools or heretics. So neither priests who supposedly speak for God nor philosophers who supposedly speak for reason should be trusted. This logocentric claim to speak from a privileged perspective of reason or the word of God or whatever is a bluff that must be called, or better, deconstructed. And the way that the evangelical church talks about it,
backsliding, walking away. The evangelical church tends to call this backsliding or falling away or turning your back on, or
dismantling Christianity, or deconversion. They call it a lot. Deconversion instead of deconstructing, which is actually not accurate, because dismantling is a result of deconstruction, but it's not always the result of deconstruct, or not dismantling, deconversion. Deconversion is not always the result of deconstruction. Not everyone walks away from the faith altogether after the process is over. A lot of people come to something new and hopefully beautiful and life-giving, but
hopefully healthier.
Right. Have you ever heard of the Duggar family? They're very popular. Yes. Okay. So when I was very deep in Southern Baptist evangelical, they were like, I read their books, I watched their shows, I made their laundry detergent, loved them. Okay. I have continued to follow the family through all they've been very publicized lately. But there are two sisters in particular, Jill and Ginger, that I still follow. I've read both of their books. And I like the way that Ginger talks about deconstructing, because she doesn't like the word deconstructing. She calls it untangling, which I like, even though my untangling looks way different from her untangling. I'm not necessarily. Yeah, I'm not necessarily like, there's such a negative connotation to deconstruction. I feel like that we're just breaking the whole thing down. And that's not, for personally, it's more about untangling what I've been taught that was more of what the pastor thought or what my parents thought, or other than just what Jesus was speaking to me. And so I like the word untangling for me personally. And she describes it way more eloquent than that in her book. But even though me and her did not end up in the same place theologically or anything, I enjoyed reading about her journey and what she went, through in her faith kind of crisis that she was in.
So I discovered the Duggar family in the middle of the night when they were still on Discovery Health.
Yes.
And she was pregnant with the 13th child.
Yes.
And we were a homeschooling family. And so I'm sitting here going, please don't homeschool. Please don't say you homeschool. Oh, of course they homeschool. But I got pulled in because they looked so stinking happy.
Yes.
Like all these loads of laundry every day, and they're happy, and all these kids, and everybody had a buddy. And when the new wore off, when the shine wore off, and you began to see behind the scenes, it wasn't necessarily as all happy as was put out front. And I think that is the reality for many of us, that what we see is a presentation, a carefully curated part of something that is not the reality. And I think that becomes true for churches and for ministries, is what they're allowing us to see is the all cleaned up, highly produced part. And because I mean, clearly Laura and I love the word untangling too, because we chose it for the title for the podcast. For much of the same reason. I had not read their books or actually listened to their books at the time, but I thought deconstructing sounds like taking it apart, like the building is no more and will never be again. Now it's going to be a pile of rubble. Whereas what I wanted to do was give people the power to choose the parts they wanted to keep, and the parts that were not God, that were not Jesus, you didn't have to keep. You could lose.
Yes.
So the Duggars were part of my journey.
Yes, same. Love it.
Yeah.
Ginger's podcast is great. If you don't listen to it, you should listen to that.
Okay.
Well, how about well, Rhanda, what is your understanding of deconstruction or that the concept of untangling or whatever? Is that thought about before?
I didn't even really consider like what I was doing at the time, like deconstructing. That wasn't even something that I was familiar with until probably like 2020 on like TikTok. I think I've heard that for the first time. And to me, it is a lot of like taking things apart, like I guess like kind of stripping everything down. Like you're peeling back like the layers of an onion to try to figure out like what's at like the core of this. I use the term unlearning a lot because with that comes a lot of like I think Renee, I think you said something like that, like what wasn't this in the Bible, or was this what my pastor said, or was this what my pawpaw said, or was this just like what I was taught? And I still will tell people like I do unlearning every single day. Still, like there's still things that like trip me up. But to me, like deconstruction is kind of like taking it apart, and then you get to the end and you have to decide like, do I want to put this back together, or am I happy with it the way that it is? And for me, that was like I stayed in that limbo for a while. Oh goodness. Okay, sorry.
Frozen a little bit. Oh, we lost Rhanda for a second.
We lost her. She'll come back. She'll come back.
Well, Renee, would you like to go ahead and maybe start to tell us a little bit? Well, what kind of what's your foundation? Where are you coming from? What's the belief system, or maybe the way it was for you in the beginning? What was it that you started with? We'll move maybe on a journey from where that was to where you are now.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in a very Christian household with two parents and two younger sisters. We were in a Southern Baptist church, very fundamental and evangelical. We were at church every time that the doors were open. I have been, I think, part of a youth group probably since I was 5 years old, because my dad was the youth pastor and I was the oldest daughter. My sisters were twins, so taking them everywhere was a little more of a hassle. So I got to go everywhere with the youth group from the time I was 5 until we eventually left that church when I was 17.
Did you enjoy part of that?
Yeah, I loved it. I was like the cool, little sister getting to hang out with all the, teenagers that I thought were, just the coolest people on the planet. So that was a fun time for me. Once I started coming into my teenage years, our my dad was my youth pastor. So that's already a little weird. You know, you've got, he's dad, but he's also like this teacher and person in charge of the church. So there were always kids like in and out of our house, always calling, you know, reaching out to him. And so it was a little weird to not have a youth pastor I could go to because he was my dad, you know? So that was a little weird. My mom was, and always has had some, a lot of health issues, but my dad, on the other hand, was a very active, never had any health issues, always very present. He was a very, very present dad. And I had a lot of friends who were so jealous, like, oh my goodness, your dad takes you outside and plays with you, or, you know, your dad jumps on the trampoline with you, or, you know, I remember one time when I think I was about 13 or 14, he checked me out of school on a Friday, and me and him just went on a father-daughter trip, you know, to Gatlinburg for the weekend. And so I had a very positive childhood until, and church was always at the center of that. If dad wasn't at home or at work, he was at church. He was a deacon, he was a youth pastor, he was a trustee, he was always involved at church. Over any mission trips we did, I could literally close my eyes. I haven't been in that church since I was 17, and I could close my eyes and still walk you through every single room in that church. That was like home to me. Yeah. And so we were a great family, like parents really like almost grossly in love, you know, like, okay, I have friends coming over, please don't make out in the kitchen kind of parents. Until one day it wasn't. I looking back on it now as an adult myself, not much younger than they were at the time that all this happened. I know there was more than we saw, but it almost felt like we went to sleep one day in this wonderful Christian united family and woke up in something completely different. My dad was accused of having an affair. My mom was battling breast cancer. My dad was involved in an accident where a young boy lost his life, and it all happened in the same year. So like our whole world was turned upside down.
How old were you?
That would have been in 2002. So I was 16, 17. My parents ultimately got a divorce. It was a very ugly divorce. And me and my sisters were kind of split in a way. I mean, I saw a lot more than they did because they were only 12. And my mom really confided in me a lot. Me and my mom always been really close. But she kind of leaned on me a lot during that. So I knew a lot more, I guess, kind of details than my sisters did at the time. And there's a lot more to that, but it all ended up with us leaving the church. We left that church, and that was heartbreaking for me. I mean, I'd literally grown up in this church. My best friends went to this church, you know, all the boys that I liked went to this church, you know, I mean, it was just my whole life. But at that same time, I was also very privately alone, not confiding in anyone about feelings I was having for my best friend. I had a best friend who had not a great home life, so she ended up living with us for a couple of months, and I was having these thoughts that I knew my parents would, like, it wasn't even something I could even entertain in my own brain, because gay was not a word we said in our house. We just, like, gay people did not exist. It was not a thing. We had no gay friends. We did not have diverse friends at all. We had no black friends, brown friends, gay friends. We were, you know, so that was something that I struggled just keeping pushed down. I didn't talk to my best friend. Well, it would have terrified her, I'm sure. So I didn't talk to her. I didn't talk to anyone. And then my parents got a divorce. I very, very quickly after that, the day after I graduated high school, actually, got married. I married just the guy that I happened to be dating. He was 2 years older than me. So he had his own place. And I was like, I won't have to go back and forth between my parents all the time. My dad had started dating and was about to marry someone else who had kids. And that was just too much for me. And I was like, I'm 18. I can get married. I'm getting married. I don't want to deal with this. So I did. He was my best friend at the time. And then 3 years later, we had our oldest daughter. And so she was born when I was 20. So my life my life at 15 and 20 were like polar opposites. In that 5 years, everything in my life changed. Around the same time, I was also dealing with not living at home and my parents not having to my parents didn't make me go to church. They couldn't make me go to church. I was my own, so I was able to, I didn't have to go to church with my dad. My mom didn't stay in church, unfortunately. And still is having kind of her own spiritual journey that looks very different from everyone else in our families. But I think that was just a small spark of not having or feeling like I had to go to church with my dad.
Was that disorienting for you?
Very. Even he would still even like call on Sundays, did you go to church today? Just making sure that I went to church, I guess. We did go back to the new church he had joined. We joined that church. We became very involved in that church. My ex-husband was a deacon. I was teaching the little kids Sunday school class. I was very involved with the youth group because I wasn't much older than the youth group. And that led to someone else in that congregation was struggling with same-sex attraction. That's how they like to label it, and I was able to
the church or the church
yeah,
person.
The church. Or the person that went to that church. So we all went to this church together. And that was the first time in my life that I had ever been like, oh my goodness, I struggle with that too. And I did. My husband was very aware. He was actually one person I could talk to because you just have to know this man. He was very flippant about everything. He was just like, okay, whatever, So I connected with her and I was able to talk to her and be like, okay, like talk to me about this. And then we ended up having a relationship, and that was world ending for all of us involved. For me, for my marriage, for us at that church, for her relationship with her parents, with her in that church. That was probably the roughest year of my life. My husband and I got a divorce. Our children were very small. We had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old at the time. And that relationship lasted about a year. It was the most toxic relationship of my life. And it was because we were both very much struggling with trying to reconcile our faith with our sexuality. And
can I interrupt you for a second?
Please.
What was the problem with the faith versus the sexuality for you? What was the need to reconcile? Yeah, what was the conflict?
So just being taught your whole entire life that being gay is a sin, but not only that it's a sin, because right, we all sin, we all lie, or we gossip, but the way that the church environment that I grew up in, it was like gay was so much worse than everything else. Like being gay sent you to hell. Like lying, you could be like, oh, sorry, I lied, and all was right with the world again. But
lie again tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
Or an affair or murder. We did prison ministry, but that was the one that was worse than everything else.
Yes. And so I internalized that and I hated myself. And I hated her, and I hated the people that made me feel that way. And I was mad at God, and I was mad at the church. And I was like, why would God give me these feelings if it was just going to send me to hell? And it was a lot. I mean, I remember I would sit on, we were so poor. I'd sit on our little old used futon that smelled and scroll on Facebook. And if I saw anything that was scripture, a worship song, oh, I went to church today. I couldn't scroll fast enough. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to hear it. I just didn't want anything to do with the church. So I completely left the church for about a year. I got out of that talk.
You experienced deconversion.
Yeah, I was done. I was done because I was finally comfortable in my sexuality. I was like, okay, it was clicking for me. This is why every relationship that I've ever had with a boy ended the way it did. And it always ended with cheating, and it was always me that was cheating because I felt like I was always looking for something else. Something wasn't there. Something wasn't right. No matter how great the guy was. My husband was a great guy. He was a really good friend to me, and he should have always just been my friend. And luckily, we both are grown up enough where there's no animosity towards us or towards each other in that aspect. I'm very grateful for him or to him for that. But so here I was with these two very small babies, and my whole life had been completely turned upside down. I did get out of that relationship. I definitely don't want to speak for the other person in this relationship. But it was gut wrenching. It was like prying apart to, I don't even know how to describe it. It was bad. I probably should have went to therapy. It was really, really hard. But then God sent Paige to me, and that's my wife now. We've been together for, 52 years. It feels like some days, but what year is it? I guess this year will be 14 years. And I was finally able to see what true love, as cliche and Disney as that sounds, it's true. She was great. She was so good to my children. She still is so good to my children. She's been there for them since day one. Treats me like better than anyone ever has. We've worshiped together. We've grieved together. We've lost loved ones together. It's, we've been through it all, I feel like. But there was still, especially in the early years, always a part of me that was like, but is this wrong? I didn't have the same struggle that I did in that first relationship. And I didn't really realize why until one day I was actually talking to Laura. And she made me, my relationship with that first partner was very sinful. I was married to not them. And so it was, I was essentially cheating on my husband with this person. But when Paige came along, we had a clean slate, and, there were no spouses on either side involved. And but there was still always just something I just felt very uneasy for a very long time. And it took me a long time to kind of realize that it was more of the disappointing my family and my past church family was what I was struggling with. And I felt there was one day I was sitting in the McDonald's parking lot, and God it's probably the only time I've ever, I cried in the McDonald's parking lot waiting on them to bring my chocolate chip cookies. Because I felt, he was like, you just need to chill out. Like, I've got you. You're good. It's good. You're good. And it was such a calming, it just came out of nowhere. It was so calming to me. There are days I still struggle with my faith journey. I don't know that it will ever, do we ever really get there? I feel like it's a work in progress every day. It's been rough lately, my faith journey. It's so hard to reconcile being a Christian when you see so many Christians in the media and you don't even want to be associated.
Yeah.
I was talking to a coworker about
We
that yesterday.
We use the same names
Yes.
to identify ourselves, and yet we have such a very different understanding of what that means.
Yes.
And it's like, there's a part of me that hates for the world to identify me with the same name.
Yes.
Yeah, Tam and I were talking about that this morning, or today, actually. We were saying, I wish we could just start calling ourselves something else, like Jesusite or
something,
something other than Christians, because it's been hijacked in a way that it's become a bad word to really good, smart, intelligent, kind, loving people. Christianity has become a bad word because it's become so toxic.
And it just puts me in a tailspin. I'm already an anxious person anyway, and so I overthink everything. But even people in my family who are like in agreement with things that are going on, and I'm like, but how can you go to church every day and worship this God that loves so hard everyone and is so radically inclusive, and still, so it's a struggle. We have learned just to not bring up religion at family functions because it's going to end in an argument, and so we just don't. But it's made me rethink. I'm actually so thankful. I don't know that I would wish necessarily being gay on anyone because it is a hard battle to fight sometimes. But I'm so thankful that I am, because it has really opened. And I hate that, it had to happen to me before I could empathize with people. But, it helps me work with, I have to work with two coworkers that are Black. And so we talk a lot about being minorities in society, and it really makes you stop and empathize and listen and learn when similar isms are happening to you as well. So I'm very thankful. I feel like it's made me just kinder, open to people. Relationships change things. I also hate the media because they portray gay people to be these crazy naked people in parades, and that's not an everyday, we go to the grocery store and go to work and raise our children and fall asleep on the couch and walk our dogs just like everyone else. And I think that relationships with people that are different than you are so important. And that was something that was so lacking in my childhood that I'm thankful is not lacking in my children's childhood. They get to grow up in a very diverse school system, neighborhood, church, and I'm thankful for that.
I'm thankful for you too. I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to ask Rhanda,
let somebody else talk.
Give us a little bit of your background. Like, where did you start? What was your foundation before you entered into this deconstructing process or untangling process or whatever unlearning thing? What did you have to unlearn, I guess?
So I guess like it all starts for me in like I'm from a very, very small town. And my family has gone to the same tiny little church for like ever. Like my great grandmother, who I was very close to, lived literally on the same little dirt road as this tiny little church. So I grew up going there, not super often because like my parents got a divorce when I was like 4 or 5. But I did go a lot with my great grandmother. I would go to vacation Bible school and stuff like that. But I feel like it really starts with I went to preschool at a Christian school. So I was 4, and I don't remember a ton of it. I do remember very much being like the odd kid out all the time. And then my parents got a divorce, and there's nothing that didn't have anything to do with me. I'm 4 years old, but everybody knew because it's a small town, and I had cousins that were there as well. And I like remember a teacher talking to me about it in a not very nice way. But past that, I grew up in this very tiny little church with a very, very scary fire and brimstone preacher, who I will say, when I was a child, I loved him. I loved him. I'm trying not to name drop him. Absolutely loved him. Grew up a little bit, and I was like, that was scary. Like, I was scared. I was terrified, actually. I grew up being told like that like liars go to hell constantly. Like, if you lied about anything, like, oh, I took a cookie out of a cookie jar, it was liars go to hell, like, immediately. A lot of, if you misbehave, you're going to go to hell. A lot of that. And then also, just, like the vacation Bible schools where like they're using scare tactics on children to get them to get saved on like getting saved night. Like, that happened to me when I was like 5, 6, whatever. Like, just go, because I went every year, just going up. And this is nothing negative about like my family or my great grandmother. I think she was an angel. This is what she grew up in, so it's what I grew up in.
Right.
And my mom kind of being the same way. And then I got older, and I started going to a youth group at a very large Baptist church for my tiny little town. And that, I think, definitely made things a lot worse for me, because like being kind of an alternative kid in a small town is already really hard. Also, I'm sorry it's so dark. I'm sitting outside because I have a 5-year-old.
It'll be okay.
We can still see your face.
Yeah.
Going to like the youth group, this church, is like an alternative kid in a small town where it's not really okay to be alternative, and it's really not okay to be alternative in the big cool Baptist church.
How would you describe alternative? What do you mean by alternative?
Just into like different things. Like, I wore a lot of black, a lot of like heavy makeup. I listened to like more alternative music styles. I was just like a little different. In my time, we called it like emo kids. They're still emo kids now, but
in my time, I forgot when I was.
See, I wasn't that cool. Not that committed. But so there was a lot of pressure put on me to change like the way that I dressed, everything, because like I needed to look like a Christian. There was a lot of like Renee said, a lot of like hatred and stuff being spewed about gay people, anybody that was different. And then realizing that I was into girls at a pretty young age, being like, oh goodness, like they're talking about me. Like, how do I deal with that? I can't help it, but also like trying to hide it, trying to not deal with that. I did come out at like 13, and it was not good. It did not go well for me. I got picked on a lot at school by the same kids I went to church with, and I kept going to church and just basically said like I just did it after that. But it was just a lot of like, you can't do this because you're different, like you're weird, you're not like normal enough, I guess, to like be Christian. I tried to go to a Christian school in my town when I was like 14 because I had some health problems, and it was a tiny little school, so they could help me a little bit more. And the principal wouldn't let me in because he said my faith wasn't strong enough because of the way that I dressed.
So he your outfit and said you're not a strong enough Christian.
Yeah, he asked me, because it was like an interview to see if you could get into the school. He asked me if I was on drugs, which I was not, probably 15 times in the 45 minutes, an hour that I talked to him. And then a couple of days later, he called and told me that he had prayed about it and that he didn't feel that my faith was strong enough for me to go to his school, which doesn't make any sense, because now I'm like, well, if you didn't feel like my faith was strong enough, you could have helped me out a little bit.
That's what I was thinking. Like, wouldn't he want you there?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But it
like that was his opportunity to form you in the faith. And
yeah. So, and then also, like everything that I was ever taught was very like fire and brimstone. If you don't do this, you're not going to get into heaven. You're not going to get very like rapture heavy too, to the point that I'm still a little scared of it. Like I've told Laura a million times, let me walk into a room that there should be people in and there's not people in it. I'm like, oh God, I've been left. I'm left. I'm stuck. I'm here. Oh no. Oh no.
I do that when I can't get a hold of my family.
Yeah.
All three of you grew up in rapture theology, Christianity. And I'm like the holdout where I didn't get that. So every time I sit down and talk with any one of you, I'm like, wait, what? Wait, go back. You just drop this little gem of something, a reality of your childhood. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't. What are you talking about?
I remember when I first came to Anniston, I had 2 male associate pastors who were both raised in the Methodist church. So they were not raised with rapture theology. And so I would mention something and they had no context for it. And they talked about not growing up in that. And I said, you have no idea what a gift it was to not grow up constantly afraid that you were going to be left behind because you said a bad word or you let your boyfriend put his hand up under your shirt or because you didn't go to church on Saturday night, that you were suddenly going to have to go through those 7 years of tribulation just because you made a mistake and you got left behind. It was a thing. Movies
or like,
and
who's gonna take care of me when my parents disappear and their teeth fillings are left in the bed because those can't go to heaven. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I
No,
told this story I told this story on our rapture episode when we talked about this, but during seminary, I was on the Orlando campus of seminary and in a short term, and we were talking, it was a New Testament survey class, and we were talking about rapture theology and how it's not a part of Methodist theology. And the teacher asked us to take a break. And during the break, we all snuck into the next classroom with the lights off and just left one person in the room. And when the professor came back, he was like, what happened? It just stop. And the teacher started dying laughing. And he said, if you really wanted to pull it off, you had to leave your clothes in the chair. Like you had to disappear with the clothes. And of course, that would have caused a whole different set of problems for us. Done that. But yeah, so it's a whole different world to grow up in. But so I get that. Yeah.
And it's crazy because my husband did not grow up very religious at all, actually. So we come from very, very different worlds in that. If you guys know what Judgment House is,
I was in Judgment House. They always put me in hell in the Judgment House because I'm a little weird.
It's because you wore all that black.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, they were like, you know what?
Put her down there. Put her down there in the basement of the church.
They just barely snatched you out of there anyway. So
Did they think you might learn something, Rhanda? Like, did they put you there because you're already there anyway, or did they just think she's a good typecast? I don't know.
I'm a very convincing actor, I guess. I don't know. They said it was because I could scream really loud, and it was funny because hell was literally the basement of the church. So you had to go down this huge flight of stairs, and my job was to scream loud enough that the people at the top of the stairs could hear me. Like high pitched, like, oh no, I had the worst sore throat by the end of it.
I'm sure.
They never brought us water down there either, and they were constantly striking matches to give it that like hell smell, I guess. I don't know. But
sulfur is definitely part of the stereotypical hellscape.
Judgment House was a big thing for us. I was in it, but I also probably got saved every single year because of Judgment House because it's so scary. It's basically just like a haunted. Like they do it in October. It's like a haunted house, but for the Baptists, because they're not allowed to do Halloween. But that's terrifying. That was so. Like I'm thinking back on like all the times that I went to Judgment House and like walking through the hell scene and how like scary it is. But yeah, my husband didn't experience any of that, and every single year I beg him to go to a Judgment House with me, and he will not go. He won't go, and I really wanted to. But
they still put those on.
Yes,
they do
locally. I found 2 this year, and nobody would go with me.
I'll go with you. I've never been.
Hey friends, you've just watched the first half of a conversation with 2 beautiful friends talking about their journey of deconstruction. Come back next episode, next week, to hear the rest of the conversation. Laura and I want to thank you again for listening to Untangling Faith. Your comments, thoughts, questions, and ideas are greatly valued and even necessary to keep our episodes relevant. Please email your thoughts to untanglingfaithpodcast@gmail.com, which you can find in the About This Episode section of the podcast. We'd also appreciate it if you would share Untangling Faith on social media. Help us keep the conversation going. Thanks again, and we love you.